want to come right out of the gates with it, man. What is going on with the offensive line grades at Pro Football Focus? There's no way the Cowboys have the best offensive line in the sport.
Well, there's a difference between the grades and the distinction that they get, the award, I guess, that they give out, because the award that they give out is just given out by whoever. I think Sam Monson gave out those awards for that. He was the arbiter for that. But as far as the grading goes, I think the grading's pretty fair because a lot of the season, the Cowboys' offensive line was really good. I mean, they ranked second in pass blocking efficiency, which is a rating of pressures and sacks with a weighting more towards sacks on that rating, and they graded second behind the Tampa Bay Bucks there. They finished in the top half of this NFL in yards before contact and stuff rate. So even though that they played poorly against San Francisco, really, really poorly against San Francisco, and were one of the major reasons why they lost that game, I honestly don't think the grades, in essence, when you take a look at the season as a whole, were that bad. And people that I think that are surprised by how well the Cowboys' offensive line graded don't watch too many offensive lines, because offensive line play as a whole in the NFL, I think, is down.
That definitely could be the case. I mean, Connor Williams, for instance, do you feel as though he's about to go get a pretty hefty payday by an offensive needy team, say Jacksonville or Miami, or you name the team that's really in dire need of some offensive line help?
I think he's going to get a decent payday. I think he's going to get paid enough that he's not going to it's going to be too expensive for the Cowboys' taste. I think because his age, I think, helps him in that situation. And I think just getting a new coat of paint with a new team would be good for him, be somewhere where maybe he's a little bit more appreciated because he's not surrounded by all pros all the time, because I do think he's a competent and capable guard, even though I think what many fans feel about him and a lot of the penalty-related concerns.
John Owning with us here of PFF here in the Nosebleed Seats. Now, one of the other players that PFF seemed to have an interesting grade for throughout the year was Trayvon Diggs. I'm curious your thoughts on Diggs, and maybe, I don't know if you even know what went into that, but why some maybe that you work with at PFF weren't as high on Trayvon as some others were.
I think they weren't as high on him because he does give up a lot of yards, and he gives up a lot of big plays, especially on those shallow crossing routes where he gets really loose with his coverage. And man, he gave up a lot. I can think of like 3 or 4 plays where he gave up, big chunk yardage off of those. And then he just, you have the A.J. Green double move where he was beaten. He gets beat a lot on these moves because he's so aggressive. And we saw it against the San Francisco 49ers where he tried to jump the drag route, and then they cut it upfield, and it was a big play. So his aggressiveness lends itself to grading poorly, I think, a little bit, because he jumps so many routes and he's looking for those big plays so much. But my personal opinion, I think he's a young ascending corner who's a playmaker. I think he needs to get stickier in coverage. I think he needs to do a better job of picking his spots, when to be aggressive, when not, and I think that will come with experience. I think he's going to start grading better and start grading with the top cornerbacks in the league as soon as he becomes a little bit more consistent, a little bit more tight with his coverage and picking his spots better.
It's John Owning, Pro Football Focus, with us here in the Nosebleed Seats. How big of a problem is Kellen Moore? Would you be bringing him back right now if you were Jerry and company?
I don't think he's a huge problem. I think he's mainly just like a young offensive coordinator. You got to think he's only been on the job 2 years. He had 1 year as the quarterback's coach before that. He's going to be learning on the job. I think he does some good things with formational and personnel diversity. We've seen that with the McGovern plays. We've seen that with the variety of formations that he used to attack teams. But I think there's areas where he can improve as well. I think he could use more motion at the snap, not only for the advantages that he can create in the passing game against things like man coverage, but in the running game, creating missed run fits, creating more information that the defense has to download before they attack. Things like that. I think his play sequencing in games and making adjustments on the fly could be better. I think he could do a better job of making backs' life easier with more play action, more motion at the snap, stuff like that. So I think there's areas where he can improve, but I also think he's also good. He's really creative. He creates really smart, one-shot plays. You see that he does a good job, creating big plays in situations, and he does a good job getting his playmakers the ball when he wants to do it. But he just needs more experience. A lot of the things that he needs to improve on won't be improved until he gets more experience. And, I'm kind of on the fence of would I want him back. I think I do want him back mainly because I remember the first 6 weeks of the season, how good everything was, but I wouldn't be opposed if they went in a totally new direction if, say, they fired McCarthy or something.
Now, speaking of McCarthy, you mentioned McCarthy. Should he return?
See, that's the one. I just don't know really what he does well. He doesn't call plays. He's not involved in the schemes of the offense. He's definitely not involved in the defensive side. And we saw his issues with time management. I don't really appreciate his overall philosophy. That whole thing that he was talking about, the 55 completions and rushes, is kind of concerning for me and kind of equates to an old school mindset, and kind of the NFL is kind of moving away from that kind of mindset, as you see with all the teams still left in the playoffs now. So, I would be much happier getting a new head coach in here. And if that requires getting a new offensive coordinator as well, I'm all for it.
John Owning, Pro Football Focus, with us here in the Nosebleed Seats in your home of the Cowboys, 105.3 The Fan. I loved your breakdowns every single week, your film breakdowns when you were with the Dallas Morning News. Now you're carrying it over with PFF. But when you've watched Dak Prescott this year, what did you notice, if anything, the biggest difference from him first half of the season, before the bye, before that calf injury, and the second half of the season where it was up and down? I didn't know what Dak Prescott we were going to get in week week out, and really how disappointed were you in his performance on Sunday in that wildcard game against San Francisco?
Pretty disappointed. I think a lot of it came down to a lack of trust with his protection up front. I mean, I could go on for days about, the musical chairs that Joe Philbin was playing up front on the offensive line and how that really deteriorated the offensive line's play through that kind of that midweek stretch where Dak was struggling. And then toward the end, offensive line is about building camaraderie so that they can pass off stunts, so they can protect on the same level, point out blitzes, all of that. And the Cowboys just didn't do a good job of that all the way up to the end of the season. So I think his lack of trust there eroded his ability to attack downfield. One thing we saw a lot was when defenses changed the picture on him, moving from say a 2-high coverage to a 1-high coverage, he was checking the ball down at a alarmingly high rate. And I think that came down to he just didn't think he had the protection, or he didn't trust in his protection enough to hold the ball and look and really decipher what was going on. So he just attacked and got the ball out quick so that he could mitigate any damage that would happen then.
There is question marks regarding Amari Cooper and if he comes back to this football team because of the potential cap savings, or maybe even if via trade if the Cowboys moved him. How important do you think Amari Cooper is to this offense, and would you like to see him back, or do you think it would be smart for the Cowboys to move on from him?
I think he's extremely important. I think he's the best receiver they got still about getting open on man coverage consistently. Even when he's not gaining targets, he's still getting open on man coverage concepts. He has really good releases, really good. He can be a really dynamic threat when you get the ball in his hands a lot. And I think that he can help dictate coverage. I think without him, then you're going to have defenses just isolating CeeDee Lamb and being able to take him out of games when they're not going. And then after that, Cedric Wilson is going to be going against number 2 corners instead of just slot or number 3 corners. So that's going to take away some of his effectiveness, and it's just going to have a cascading effect that's going to make everybody's life more difficult on the offensive side of the ball.
John, who would you like to see replace Dan Quinn if and when he becomes the Denver Broncos head coach?
I mean, who would I like to see? I mean, personally, I would love, Vic Fangio's the dream hire, but I don't feel like that is going to happen. But of the more realistic scenarios that have been talked about, I think Mike Zimmer is somebody who's a really interesting name who I gravitate towards. As much as his tenure with the Minnesota Vikings ended with a dud, I think he's still one of the best defensive minds there are, with the things he does with his blitz pass, what he does with the mug in the front, what he can do with versatile defenders, what he does on the back end with his quarters concepts. I think it's really lends itself to where the NFL is going and how the best get productivity and efficiency out of your defense. And I think he would be a natural progression from what Dan Quinn employed this year.
John, our guy Bobby Belt wants to know if you regret being an off-ball linebacker bigot and if you're now willing to embrace a guy like Georgia's Nakobe Dean. And he'll hang up and listen.
No, I don't. No, I don't feel bad. Linebacker is still one of the lesser valuable positions on the defense. Micah Parsons will even tell you that. He said it on his talk with the IM. They're not IM athlete anymore, but when he was talking with Ryan Clark, he said offensive line's more valuable than linebacker. He understood, so why can't Bobby?
That's fair. It's very, very fair.
Bobby's a stubborn man.
Bobby is stubborn. He is very stubborn. We love him dearly, but man, I mean, he tried to steal our pigeon. I don't know if he told you that, John, but
our son.
he stole
He tried to steal your pigeon?
Yeah, he stole our pigeon. He did bring him back, thankfully alive, but you can't trust that Bobby.
Have to go to war against Bobby.
Surprisingly sober. He brought Julius back surprisingly sober.
It's crazy. It's crazy. All right, John, before we let you out of here, though, what do you think is the biggest need area for the Cowboys as they head into this offseason?
Well, I think obviously if Connor Williams doesn't come back, you really want to upgrade that left guard position. But outside of that, I'm going to keep saying it every year until they do it. Invest in a dominant nose tackle. You need to get somebody who can eat up gaps in the run game, who can occupy blockers, who can at least push the pocket as a pass rusher, even if he's not going to give you any speed. You need to get a big-bodied nose. Unfortunately, Quentin Bohanna didn't cut it this year. Justin Hamilton was okay in situations, but he was on the practice squad and got poached. So I would please finally invest in a dominant run defending nose tackle.
Yes. Is there any, have you perused the free agent streets? Is there any free agents you'd like to bring in from that standpoint?
Alonzo Fatukasi from the New York Jets is my favorite name. I haven't looked at a ton, but he's a guy that really flashed when I was looking through one of PFF's lists for one of the articles we were putting out. And he's someone who I've liked from afar for a long while. He eats up blocks. He can even give you a little bit as a pass rusher. He can shed blocks and even make negative plays in the run game. So he's kind of like he would be my North Star if I was the Cowboys in free agency. But we'll see. Jets have a lot of salary cap space. Who knows if they bring him back.